Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm your host, Sam Pasco, alongside my co-host, Erik Halterman. We're talking everything KBO here on KBO Chats Live. It's 5:30, so that's what we're doing right now here on RotoWire. We're upgrading the graphics. We got a great show planned for you today. As always, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at RotoWireKBO, and visit our website, rotowire.com. There's some great tools that if you don't know about right now, you are missing out, and that's what we're highlighting today. Erik, how are you today? I know there were no KBO games yesterday, but how did you cope?
Not bad. Don't mind rest from writing every now and then, but it's been good. Still need a haircut, but other than that, life's pretty good. How about you?
Pretty good. Also need the haircut. I'm also on the same boat there. So, but yeah, getting by here on some good KBO action. So, as people are tuning in, we are opening up the comment section. So at the end of the show, if you're on YouTube or Periscope, hit the comment section with any questions or comments you have, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. We already got some great ones planned for some Twitter comments that have already been on there. So without any further ado, let's dive in. We're changing up the format a little bit. We're going to talk about first our league overview. So that's our little graphic here. We got a little tabs. We're first starting with projected starters. We're seeing now about each series. We're first starting Monday, looking at the 3 games ahead. So Erik, tell me about kind of these projected starters. Is there anyone notable of today or this 3-game series that you're really, really excited for as a team?
Well, the main thing is that the pitching slate today specifically is one of the deepest I've seen. I think we got half the starters tonight are foreign imports, which, as you know, tend to be among the better starters. Each team only gets 2 foreign starters, so they're going to invest those spots in good ones if their scouts are at all good. So we got 5 of those pitching today, along with a guy who's one of the top Korean pitchers in Chang-Mo Koo of the Dinos. I think we're in for some potentially some low-scoring games tonight at the very least.
Yes, and speaking of low-scoring games, that is reflected in the odds, as you can take a look here of the actual games we have going today. The ones highlighted in yellow were featured on the KBO show, some of our favorite picks. But in terms of the matchups here, one that stands out to me is that Lotte Giants Samsung Lions game. You got the strikeout leader Dan Straley taking the bump. Do you think the Giants? How are you feeling about the Giants? 9-8. You know, we'll talk about the exact series, but overall, how are you feeling about the Giants this year?
They were someone that a lot of people thought was going to be pretty bad to start the year. They were quite bad last year.
Erik,
they
I think we
started
lost your audio there for a second.
Oh.
Can you
hear me now? Technical difficulties. How are we doing?
Hello?
Nothing changed on my end. Hello? You got me back?
Hello?
Hello?
Some technical difficulties here, folks. Erik, you plugged in, audio all good?
Everything's all the same on my end. Can you hear me?
To go? Can everyone?
You still got me? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Are we back?
Yeah, I think we're back. We're back here. Sorry.
All right. Live TV. Let's go.
I don't know what's going on. I guess Dan Straley, you know, we spoke it and he just shut it down because that's what he's been doing to bettors right now. He's been shutting guys down. In case you're just tuning in, this is KBO Chats Live. Sam Pasco, Erik Halterman. Can we get that down? Boom, right there. So we're talking about looking at today's games. Are there any games that stand out to you as looking at edge from the kind of gambling standpoint?
Let me see. The Dinos Heroes is going to be an interesting one because you've got one of the better teams all around in the Heroes against one of the better pitchers in the league. Chang Mo Koo, who's just been almost unstoppable this year. He's given up 1 run in 3 starts, and 2 of those starts have come against the Bears and Wiz, who have the top 2 lineups. So that's going to be an interesting strength versus strength one. Definitely the game I'm most excited about.
So let's dive now into each series here. We'll get to the Giants in depth more, but let's first start with the Kia Tigers against the KT Wiz. We got an American pitcher for the Tigers tonight, and then we have another Cuban pitcher actually for the Wiz a little later in the week in Despaigne. What do you think about the Tigers and Wiz series, Eric?
Well, we've got good pitching from the Tigers versus good hitting from the Wiz, though the Wiz's good hitting takes a blow with Baeko Gong, their star 20-year-old slugger, out for a few weeks with a wrist injury. They did get Jae-Gun Hwang back from a minor finger issue. There was a time where it was looking like they're going to lose, half their best hitters. But the Wiz's pitching has been just absolutely awful this season. Mostly the bullpen. They had their closer Daeun Lee get demoted already, which you have to be pretty bad to do that. So chance for some Tigers hitters to be interesting. Other than Despaigne for the Wiz, there's not a lot of pitchers I'm scared of. So I'm interested in Tigers hitters, specifically Preston Tucker, who was having an awesome season. I think he didn't get a single hit in the weekend series, but his overall numbers are still quite excellent. He's somebody I'd be interested in most games in this series.
Oh, we'll get to Preston Tucker. I got a special slide for that and talking about Preston as our DFS pick. But this Wiz Tigers series, what do you think about the Wiz offense? Because they're first right now, runs per game, and they seem to be firing on all cylinders, almost even better than the Deuce and Bears. But yet that pitching, is it really just all that pitching? Is the offense on point, but it's the pitching? Pretty
much, yeah. They do have a loaded lineup beyond Gong. Mel Rojas, their outfielder, has also been one of the top hitters in most categories, so they still offer plenty. He's a switch hitter, which means he's pretty much playable almost any day on both FanDuel and DraftKings, though I'm not all that interested in him against Gagnon tonight, who's been really quite good.
And we're getting some fan questions here. KT Wiz over 4.5 runs. I guess that's a statement. I'm not sure, but just want to shout out Woods3 for tuning in. You can hit the comment section on YouTube and Periscope to engage with us. So moving now on to our next series, we got the Wyverns and the Bears. Wyverns, they seem to find a way to lose each and every night. Now they're going to be facing Chris Flexen. Is there any hope for the Wyverns in this series?
If there's hope, it's that the Bears pitching has been very bad. This is an interesting series. It features one of the league's best offenses in the Bears versus the worst in the Wyverns, and then also the 2 worst pitching staffs. So when you get bad hitting and bad pitching, sometimes the bad hitting just wins. I wouldn't be surprised if the Wyverns squeak their way into a game or 2. They, again, were a team. These 2 teams tied for the top regular season record last year, but the Wyverns have just been awful. Aging is part of it. They had the oldest lineup, I believe, and they've also lost a couple of their top pitchers, so it's not a surprise that they're doing worse. There's just not a whole lot of guys interesting in their lineup for fantasy purposes right now, even though the Bears have had a weak pitching staff. Maybe Jamie Romack, but he's pretty overpriced. They've got a guy, Dongmin Han, is hitting 6 homers so far this season. That makes him somewhat interesting, but there's just not a very deep lineup. I can't see myself recommending a Wyvern stack in this series necessarily, at least not at the moment.
Yeah, you said the Wyverns, their pitching staff, you can see that ERA on the screen, over 5.4. I mean, that's almost embarrassing at this point, but that 3-14 record, that will do that to you. So moving now on to the Lions-Giants series. We started talking about this one. We have the Lions. You can see here our games, how they've won, and actually primarily how they've lost all these games, and a couple of Dan Straley notes here, which, by the way, you can find all of this and more on rotowire.com. We have amazing tools. Just head over there, head on over to the KBO tab, and head over to the projected starters and the standings tab for all this and team breakdowns as we're looking at the Lions and the Giants. So, Eric, tell me about this series here, because I I don't think Straley's going to do that well because he's actually had some rough outings outside that just one great 11 strikeout game he had against Samsung.
Right. His overall numbers look a lot worse if you take out his best start, though. To be fair to him, that's going to be true about a lot of guys. If you look at the season as a whole, he's still got a strikeout rate in the upper 20%, which is better than you might think if you're in an MLB frame of mind, because the average strikeout rate in KBO is down around 18%. So he's still somebody I'm interested in, especially because the Lions are a quite weak offense, weak team overall. They're something like 6th or 7th in scoring right now, and that's while being propped up by the league's most hitter-friendly home park. So even though I hear some of your concerns about Australia and that it was mostly that one game, the Lions are still quite a friendly matchup, and Australia is surprisingly affordable.
All right, I like it. We'll have to see what happens tonight. We'll see what the former Marlin, former Oakland A does out there. But also, I did want to mention the Lions. One note about them, that they actually had a pretty surprising victory over the Houston Bears, shutting them out. David Buchanan tossing 7 scoreless. Very impressive. Was that shocking to you? Because they were pretty big underdogs heading into that game 3 of the series last week.
Yeah, I included Buchanan for his previous start as one of my top recommendations, and he was downright awful. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was, just about as bad as it gets. And so I naturally stayed away from him on his last one against the Bears lineup, and he went out and did that. So I guess that's just kind of baseball for you. He definitely has the potential to have that kind of outing, as we've seen. I don't believe he's scheduled to pitch in this one last I checked, though.
Yes, I don't think he'll be in this series from our predicted starters graphic for the Lions. But moving now on to our next series. Where are we here? Here we are. Twins, Eagles, series number 4. And this one actually is loaded with former big leaguers left and right for both teams here, both the Twins and the Eagles. You're having Chad Bell coming off an injury, making his debut tonight/tomorrow morning, depending on where you are in the world. Tell me a little about this Twins-Eagles series, because it looks like it could be pretty interesting.
Yeah, the Twins have been pretty balanced so far, and it's worked for them. They're up near the top of the standings. The Eagles have been able to pitch, and their offense, though, is just quite bad. So I'm interested in Twins starting pitchers this series. In particular, righties Tyler Wilson and Casey Kelly. They're 2 former MLB players. They both were, I think, quite bad their first time out. But you can pretty easily explain that away by the quarantine that they had to undergo when returning to Korea. I think it's pretty understandable that a pitcher getting their routine messed up by having to, sit inside for 2 weeks would have a tough time the first time out. And they've both been good since then. For the Eagles, Chad Bell, you mentioned, he's making his first start this year after an elbow issue. Potentially interesting, but I'm not interested in him tonight because he only went 2 innings in his rehab start. The odds of him going, 6 innings tonight seem pretty low. I haven't heard what the plan is, but it would make sense to me that they're not planning on using him very deep into the game. But he's one more to keep in mind for his next couple turns out. Interesting.
So that Chad Bell, he did have a decent in those 2 innings he was out. They were pretty decent. And yeah. Is there any chance where guy, it's a small league overall. So is there any chance where hey, they haven't seen this guy, this season? Is there any chance that he might be able to catch a couple batters by surprise and then be able to go a little deeper into games? Or you think there's no way he goes beyond 4 innings?
Potentially, but I'm just a little bit hesitant investing the cost in him when I just don't know. There's definitely, if you're looking for a contrarian play, trying to get somebody who's going to be less owned, I could see the argument there, but by default, I would assume he's only going about 4.
Okay. I know you're taking Tyler Wilson, too. We got a couple of his stats on here. Great outing against Samsung about 5 days ago, but overall, a pretty lofty ERA over 5.
Yeah, but that's almost entirely one start. I think he's allowed 2 earned runs in both of his last 2 starts. And again, he's facing the Eagles, who have a quite poor offense. I'm interested in most starters who face the Eagles these days.
I like it. Moving now to the Heroes and Dinos series. You can take a look at these graphics. I know it's a little fuzzy here. We're working on the graphics overall, but if you do want a complete breakdown of all the teams' stats and kind of, everything you need to know about these teams, head over to rotowire.com. it's amazing what we got over there. So I do recommend checking this out. So Erik, we got one American pitcher, I believe, in this series, Jake Brigham. But overall, is this going to be all Dinos series? Because they've dominated the league up to this point.
This is going to be one of their toughest tests. They faced the Bears already and did well there. But the Heroes were the Korean Series runners-up last year, so they were, I believe, lost in the playoff, which made them the third-place team 2 years ago. So they've been, right there the last couple of years, and I expect them to give the Dinos a run for their money. I would definitely take the Dinos tonight, again, because of Chang Mo Koo, who I think is one of the better pitchers in the league, the 23-year-old lefty who's allowed just a single run in 3 starts this year. I didn't have him as one of my recommendations in my cheat sheet today, just because the Heroes have a pretty good lineup, and he's deservedly quite expensive. But if you have the budget room, he's been, right up there with the best in the league.
Okay. Now let's move on. We're running a little on time here, but speaking of the lineups and fantasy here, you have a lot of options between FanDuel, DraftKings, and Dream 11. That's kind of a new player, for at least for Americans' eyes. Tell me a little bit about Preston Tucker. We talked about him, hinted at him a little earlier in the show. He's been cold lately, but he's facing a whiz pitching staff, which finds a way to give up runs in those late innings, left and right.
Yeah, Tucker is pretty much in that never a bad idea category. He's expensive, deservedly so on both sides, but anytime you have the room for one of the most expensive guys on the slate, he deserves to be in consideration. He's among the league leaders in most everything, even after a bit of a slump. The whiz pitcher tonight, Jisong Bae, has had a pretty good season, especially for a whiz pitcher. So I'm slightly more interested in Tucker the next 2 nights, but there's basically never a game in which Tucker's facing a righty that I'm not at least moderately interested in him.
I like that. And also, he doesn't have to face William Cuevas, as that's one of their better pitchers, one of the foreign-born guys. So he doesn't have to face that. Hopefully, he can bounce back after that cold streak against SK, which was really kind of out of nowhere, going 0 for 6. That's not what Preston Tucker does. So
yeah.
We'll have to see. And now, talking some injury notes, we got a couple of them here. We talked about Chad Bell, who is now going to be healthy. How long he goes, we don't know right now. But are there any notable injuries that could affect certain stacks or certain picks in the lineups right now?
Yeah, as you see, 2 notes there on Yu-Ji Young. That's definitely the big one. He's the best catcher in the KBO by far. He was the MVP runner-up. He led the league in OPS last year, again, as a catcher. He regularly is the cleanup man for the Dinos. He bats right-handed, and they're facing a not very imposing lefty in Sung-Ho Lee tonight. So if he plays, he's going to be one of the best plays on the slate. But if you're someone who is unable to check your lineup once lineups comes out at 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever it is your time, I would stay away from him just because he's battled multiple minor injuries this season so far, and he missed the previous game with neck soreness. He was in a home plate collision, I think, on Saturday. So I think he's going to play. I think, it's a catcher. Catchers get days off all the time. But if you're someone who won't be able to check, I would stay away from him, unfortunately, in this one, even though it is a pretty ideal scenario if he does indeed play.
Yes, I know those 2 a.m. Lineup checks might not always be the most fun, but if you want to win, they're important. In RotoWire, we got you covered with all the latest updates. One other note I want to talk about before moving on was Ben Lively. This was a little old news, but we haven't talked since. But he is going to miss 8 weeks. It was initially thought he wasn't going to miss the start at all. He was going to be healthy, but now the Lions are going to be left stranded. How big is this for the Samsung team that is pretty bad right now?
Yeah, I mean, he's supposed to be one of their best pitchers. Again, you only get 2 foreign pitcher slots, so they better be good if you're investing your precious resources in them. He hadn't been awesome this year, but he was pretty good in a limited sample last year, so it's definitely a blow.
All right, let's continue moving through here. Now we're on to our Twitter Q&A. We have a couple here. You put out a tweet a little while ago asking who wants to ask some questions to us. What are your KBO questions? First up, we have ChoochCast asking who is the fastest player in the KBO. A little picture of Aaron Altair, which I don't think he's considered the fastest player, but he is tied for sixth with 3 stolen bases. And you can see him sliding there as a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. Eric, who in your mind is the fastest player in the KBO?
Right. So unfortunately, unlike MLB, we don't have publicly available StatCast data in the same way. So we can't just look at sprint speed, but we can look at steals. So if you're the kind of fan who likes speed, the leader in steals last season was Park Chan-ho of the Tigers. He had 39, which was 6 more than next best. And then the guy after him was Ha-Seong Kim, who is someone who's considered to be somebody potentially coming over as soon as next year. He's a shortstop for the Heroes. So if you want to get invested in someone who has a little bit of speed that you might eventually see in the big leagues, Ha-Seong Kim would be your guy.
All right, next question. This is from DJ Trainer. What current KBO players are worth taking a look at in deeper MLB fantasy formats? I got a picture of Roberto Ramos here because he's so young. We talked about this last time. He was most likely going to make his debut this year if he had stayed stateside. But who do you think is going to be the go-to for dynasty formats?
Ramos is definitely one who could come back. I don't know what his plans are, but he could definitely come back to affiliated ball. There's 2 guys that we are pretty sure are going to get posted this offseason and will be available for MLB teams to sign. One of them is Ha-Seong Kim, who I just mentioned. He's the 24-year-old shortstop for the Heroes. He's interesting that he does basically some of everything. He's got some power, some speed, some contact, great eye for the zone. I don't know what the reports are on his defense, but he does at least a little bit of everything. I'm not sure if above average at everything in the KBO translates into a star at the MLB level, but he doesn't seem to have holes in his game. He looks to me like somebody who could at least carve out a role. Then there's also Sungbum Na, who, if you've heard of one Korean hitter, he might be the guy. He's a 30-year-old outfielder for the Dinos. He signed with Scott Boras and was going to get posted this past winter. I believe that was the plan, except he blew out his knee early last year. He's back this year. He's hitting fine. He just had his first start in the outfield. I think it was Sunday. So proving his health is going to be important. But he can definitely hit. If you look at, I was looking at his numbers compared to Hyun-Soo Kim, who you might remember he came over a few years ago, had some time with the Orioles and Phillies. Ultimately, he didn't really make much of a difference in the MLB level. He was approximately a league average hitter while being a bad corner outfield defender, which is essentially just a bench bat, if that. But Na's numbers are better than Kim's were when Kim made the jump, although he's a little bit older. But he definitely looks to me to be someone who could hit at least an above average level in the MLB. Proving that he can play the field well again will definitely help his stock. If he's a designated hitter, there's, only 15 teams who could be interested, unless, of course, the league goes to universal DH, in which case that would help his stack also, because you'd have twice as many teams who could consider him. But he's definitely got the bat to make a difference. If you want a couple young guys who I haven't heard talk about them getting posted anytime soon, but if you're in the kind of dynasty league where you just, own everyone and hope that they eventually play in MLB, Chang Mo-koo, who I've mentioned several times already for the Dinos, the young lefty, strikes people out like few other pitchers in the league. He's just 23. And then Baek-ho Gong, who's the 20-year-old outfielder / first baseman for the Wiz. He can do everything at the plate. He hits for power, hits for contact, has a good eye, and he's only 20. So he definitely seems to have the bat to eventually play in MLB. There's some concern in that he's already been moved to first base at age 20, which again probably limits his potential suitors in the MLB, but he looks to have a bat that's good enough to make it over here eventually.
We'll have to see. A lot of people have compared the KBO to about AA to AAA level, about in that range. Not as good as the NPB in Japan, but a little better than AA stateside. So we'll have to see. Hyunjin Ryu, one of the greatest players to come out of the KBO, now with the Blue Jays, longtime member of the Dodgers. So we'll have to see what happens there. Another Twitter question here. Why are so many matches low scoring? We got a couple pictures, images here. That's why I think he has some pretty great, pitchers, Brzezinski, Wright, and Buchanan. But Erik, tell me why do you think there's so many low-scoring games in the
It's an
KBO?
interesting question. It's definitely a bit of a subjective one. If you look at the numbers, KBO this year overall, they're scoring 5.3 runs per game. That's compared to 4.8 in MLB last year. But there are definitely a few games which are quite low scoring. My theory there might be that it has something to do with the shallowness of the talent pool. Obviously, South Korea is a much smaller country than the U.S. is. So if you get a few pitchers who stand out from the rest of the bunch, they're going to stand out, I think, to a greater extent. You saw like the likes of Josh Lindblom was posting excellent ERAs 2 years ago, even as the ball was very juiced. Everybody was scoring tons of runs, but the best couple pitchers seemed to be able to stand out. I haven't done a statistical look to know if it's different than MLB, but that would be my thought there.
A lot of low-scoring games potentially tonight, if you look at the totals and some of the pitchers coming up in this 3-game series. So, I don't know. We'll have to see how it develops, like you said. 5 runs, that's plenty for me. That's a lot of action, especially when you compare it to Major League Baseball, which is just pretty much all strikeouts and home runs right now. But moving on, I believe we have one final quick Twitter Q&A. It's what's wrong with the Wiz? We got their record right here. They had a nice little winning streak there, but a lot of red, a lot of L's. What's wrong with this Wiz team? We talked about the pitching staff. What's wrong with them?
Yeah, it's mostly bullpen, though the starters aren't great either. Actually, 3 of the 5 starters, I think, have ERAs over 5.5. But it's been mostly bullpen. They've been losing late all the time, to the point where last year's closer and the guy who started as closer this year, Daeun Lee, was demoted just in the middle of the 3rd week of the season. If you look at their run differential, it's like it was 2nd best last I checked. It might be 3rd best now. So what that generally means, if your run differential is way out of line with your record, means you've got the offense to put up blowout wins and the bullpen that loses close all the time. Look at that run of extra inning losses right there. It's been that kind of thing all year.
Yeah, and look, they begin the year 3 straight shutouts. Not what you want to see from a team that's trying to compete. A lot of, like you said, a lot of extra inning losses. So see if the Wiz can turn it around. But wrapping up here now, this poll we put out last week, and Erik, I wanted to finish with this. What team have you pledged your KBO fandom to? I know we try to be, just objective about, which teams are good, which picks, but you got to have a favorite team. Who are you kind of leaning towards? You kind of like to see win each and every night.
I jumped on the Dinos bandwagon before game 1, mostly because I'm a Phillies fan stateside, and I like Aaron Altair. I really thought he was close to being good enough for a bit there. Obviously, it didn't work out. But if there's one player I'm rooting for to go over there, have an awesome couple seasons, and come back, he would be the guy. Obviously, that's worked out pretty well for me so far, seeing a lot of wins, which is nice. I think they've got some fun Korean veterans in Sungbum Na and Yuji Yang that make them quite fun to root for. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I love the Dinos. I really do, but I think just kind of root for the underdog, the Wyverns right now. Just kind of, I just want to see them win. I've almost become so connected by their losing right now. Just see there's no way the team could lose this bad all the time. So I just until they get above 500, I think I'm a Wyverns fan. Just until they do that, and then I'll hop back on the Dinos bandwagon because they got Swole Daddy, one of the best mascots in the game right now. You cannot discount that game. So we'll have to see. But that is all we got right now. As always, check out rotowire.com on your Internet Explorer, Chrome, on YouTube.
Internet Explorer, yeah.
Internet, you remember those days? You got YouTube. Just search RotoWire, and on Twitter at RotoWire KBO. Just not many actual content questions, but big question: will this be up on YouTube for review later? It will be. You can find this out. A little technical difficulties in there, but overall, a smooth show, very informative. Erik, anything else you want to leave the fans with?
Nothing I can think of. Just let us know if this is the kind of stuff you're interested in. We're doing this for you guys. So if there's a different angle on things you'd like to be hearing, let us know, and we'll try to get that done.
All right. Erik, great. Looking forward to some KBO action tonight as we begin our first 3-game series of the week.